Thank you very much. It has been really inspiring for me, and also to see how topical your research is. You can kind of address the environmental issues, artificial intelligence, machine learning, aging, and also health, and just fantastic. Thank you so much for all the presentations. And now it's time for questions. Okay, at the same moment, you were the first, perhaps.
Hi, I have a question for Tiia. You have studied these two different populations, the adult people and the elderly people, and I wanted to know if you have found any differences between these two populations.
Actually, not yet in the results. That those adults aged 40 to 70, they were actually Americans living in Florida area, and my own pilot study was conducted in Jyväskylä area, so there were also national differences but in the samples, but the results are surprisingly similar so far.
Yeah, I think that's also a very interesting result, that the results are similar. Thanks.
Yes, so I had a question about noise, actually, like how are your, like, so you are working with, also with experimental data, so are they like so, low noise experiments that you don't have to consider it, or do you have to somehow take it into account in your, like, in the math simulations?
We take it into account. So the measurements for these electric engines are actually done in the way that they put it on a piece of rubber, and then they attach sensors at very well-defined places, and then they kind of hit the engine with a soft timbre, I would call it, and they measure the vibrations. And of course, there's a certain amount of noise in that. So we work with ABB there, and they claim it's about 1% to 2%. But of course, you have to take care of that in the mathematics. So some of the kind of parameters that go along with that, you can identify quite well. And others, the ones that are, I would say, less important, luckily, you can identify not so well. But you have to keep that in mind, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Another question about machine learning and applied mathematics. I mean, I'm a physicist, and probably the first thing I wanted to ask was, how do you see the difference of a physicist solving, I don't know, how an electric motor might behave, and an applied mathematician doing the same?
Well, to me, it is like that, and I don't want to insult anybody, but like usually when you see it, like physicists use a lot of intuition to solve their problems, and this is great because they create algorithms and schemes much faster than I would do. Yeah, so you get reasonable results extremely fast, and then what the mathematician usually tries to do is justify some assumptions or justify the steps that you take. And then there have been some relatively famous cases where afterwards you got even much better algorithms, or if the physicist's approach fails, that then basically collaborating helps a lot because it's different expertises, and if they kind of grow together, then usually the result is better than doing it alone. So it's more intuition driven, while mathematics dictates certain rules related to if you think of PDEs, which you can sometimes not see as a physicist, while mathematics do not see certain physical aspects. So it's the best if you work together. But usually we set up on your models, not the other way around.
Yeah, I mean, because if I think about trying to solve some complicated mechanics problem, for example, then very quickly, if you try to do this without neglecting some aspects of the physics that in principle go in, it's going to be so complicated that you won't get anything out of that. And this, well, generally speaking, is a problem that the physicist would face, well, very quickly with this sort of a problem setting.
Yeah, elasticity is very special because they're so-called locking phenomena, and then you kind of see that the solution that the mathematics give you, if you don't take care, are like obviously flawed. And then it's time basically to look at the basic mathematical principles that kind of would help you or kind of allow you to bypass those. And then basically the mathematician could kick in. But that's not saying that physicists cannot do it, but that's usually how I experienced it.
Oh, please.
Yes, I have a question for Kaisa, because as you mentioned, you conducted this art performance thing and collected data in 2020. I was just thinking, because this going outdoors and refinding the nature. It was this huge trend during COVID. Do you think it had any effect on the results, at least for this individual feelings towards nature, like this well-being or like this outdoors activities? Do you think it played a role? If you had done it 2018 or something, do you think the results would be different?
Yeah, good question, and thanks for asking that. Of course, there may be some impact, but I think that it is not that significant because the questions that we asked from people were sort of targeting their broader relationship and experiences with nature. We were thinking whether we should ask something specific on the COVID. We decided not to. But when we analyzed the interview data, we coded in that manner that we picked all the COVID mentions under one code or label. And we noted that it was brought up to some extent, but not by everyone who involved. And also we picked up everything that was related to health and sort of cross-checked whether these were COVID-related or not. And they were mostly not COVID-related. And actually, afterwards, when I think about the feedback that we got from the performance, the biggest thing that was related to COVID was that people were thanking for us arranging the performance because during that time everything cultural was forbidden, basically. So the fact that we took them outdoors and had them performance in the woods and had the small groups and people wearing masks whenever needed and so forth. It was making the event possible, and they were really happy that there was something that they could go and participate in because people were sort of hungry for culture at that point in time.
So I could ask you, Kaisa, about your project. You emphasized in the end that it was about Finnish case, so to say. So do you have any comparable knowledge about any comparable projects made in other countries, giving information about those respective experiences and relationship there?
Well, actually, no, but that might be also me not being reading so actively lately on the matter. Most of the background literature that we went through were very abstract, so conceptual work on relational dimensions and written by environmental philosophers, for example, but not that much of empirical research, actually. And the most recent source that I have been drawing on lately is actually the IPBES values assessment that was published around the time that our paper was in revision. So I had the opportunity to refer to it in the publication. And it speaks a lot about human-nature relations, a bit with the similar intent, but with a different kind of twist, because the IPBES wanted to make a categorization of their own. So they are speaking about people living with nature or out of nature, or this kind of, they use a different kind of language. But I think there is more work that is to be done. And especially now that the IPBES values assessment is out and it has this kind of theoretical framing of its own, I can imagine that there will be empirical work globally building on that categorization, actually.
Because I was thinking about the indigenous peoples and their relations, and so it would be really interesting to kind of see also that kind of research being done.
Yes, of course, and that there is, of course, these qualitative case studies are out there. Yes, definitely.
And then I may continue also about your project, just a minor thing. Did I understand right that you used text by Pentti Linkola? Or you mentioned his name, in the end of that route, there was something connected to him?
Yes, so in the performance, the last scene where the audience was again sitting down on the moss and whatever, there was one actor who would like play a monologue that was based on Pentti Linkola's writings. And the monologue actually was written by Anna-Mari Laulumaa, who was the director, but it utilized like Linkola's writings as a material.
And did the people, the participants, did they know that it was from him?
Yeah, so they were given the handout that like gave the information on the different ski scenes.
And the reason I'm asking is because he has such a kind of he's such a provoking figure, and that's interesting. That's how did they relate to his text.
Yeah, if you are interested, I would encourage to go to YouTube and check out our channel Luonnonpaikka, because we have a video material there which has like clip from this monologue, and it's very powerful. Like when I watch it, I start almost crying myself, although I've been watching it like 100 times.
Thank you. No other? Please. Yeah, and then.
Okay, so I have also a question to Kaisa. So this happened 4 years ago, approximately. This study, and I was thinking about the longitudinal effects, like how sustained these human nature emotions and attitudes are. What would be like if you could interview these same people again? What would be the aspects that you would be like most interested to know, whether they are like temporal related to that situation and that moment in comparison to how they feel about the same stuff now?
Yeah, it would be really interesting to revisit those participants. The thing with performative art is that it is always like, it lives in the moment, and when it's over, it's like poof. So I know that if you interview people right after the performance, their responses would be different than if you interviewed them like week after, so forth. And maybe for that reason, the interview questions were framed so that they would more like encourage people to reflect their general relationship to nature and ways of life and like environmental actions and behaviors and so forth. And I think that those things don't change that much. So we did this artistic intervention, but the point of making the intervention was not to change people's behavior, not even their thinking, but more like to get them reflect a bit more deeply. And if there is some change growing out of that, then that might happen in the long term. And that would be really interesting to study. But I don't know how to do it. Maybe I should take them back to Hitonhauta and then, make a walking interview of 3.5 hours.
Yeah, my question is actually a follow-up to that question. I want to hear about your perspective of doing an art science project that obviously was very successful, but you also mentioned there were some challenges, and I want to hear what were the challenges and how did you overcome the challenges?
Okay. Well, the first challenge obviously was the COVID-19 pandemic, which made us to change our plans and prolong the project by 1 year, because we originally planned to make it in a year. And then it took 2 years to make the performance and then 3 years to get everything sort of into the manuscript phase, research-wise. I think the most important thing when planning this kind of project is to be prepared to discuss a lot, because you need to be open and start from the scratch. Everyone involved has their different kind of backgrounds and their different kinds of opinions, and you need to make time for people to open up and speak out everything that they know beforehand on the topic, and then you need to scrutinize it and decide collectively what is our playground and what stance do we take. Of course, you don't need to have a consensus, but the critical discussions are the best actually, but you will need to communicate and be on the same level enough to work together. So this is one thing, effective communication and being open to other opinions and other backgrounds and other kinds of thinking. So in our team, I'm an ecologist by background, although I have been doing social sciences for a while. Then we had an art historian, then Anna-Mari, who is professional in theater. She also has background in social sciences. And then we had also another interdisciplinary researcher, Kaisa, who is from environmental sciences background. And this was a good combo. I think that having a smaller team is more feasible. If we were 10, it would have been impossible to manage all the different perspectives and get everyone on board in the same manner that we were able to do. Then another thing that I would like to mention is the timing. So in science, things tend to take so long and the projects are prolonged because of the publication delays. The way in which artists work is much more intense. They do project after project after project. They don't like that much the thing that the projects overlap, and you need to respect that kind of manner of working. So it is the situation that your collaborators are available for you for this restricted period of time, and you need to work with them. And then after that, when the collaborative project ends, they will go on and start working in another collaborations of their own. So you can't you need to handle this as well.
Thank you.
Okay. This question is to Andreas. You mentioned the role of applied mathematician in order to explain machine learning models, and you mentioned that sort of activity of explaining could be used to learn from machine learning. But then I also started thinking, because I'm an ethicist and I work with ethics of AI, both as a researcher and then also as a sort of practitioner with companies and so forth. And one of the principles when companies and organizations, institutions do these guidelines for ethical AI, one of the most frequently mentioned principles is sort of explainability or understandability, which of course then evokes a critical thought. What might that even mean? As you mentioned, that it's in a sense impossible to understand what's happening, and also from sort of this social setting perspective, who should understand, who should be able to explain, and who needs to listen, and where would that sort of explaining lead to? But I was wondering whether you see opportunities in your sort of field of expertise and experts of applied mathematics in also explaining machine learning in a way that would also sort of make sense in this ethical evaluation context, or for the ethical reasoning that is being done, or hopefully is being done around AI.
Yeah, I guess that the best would be if everybody could understand everything about AI, but that's maybe not feasible, at least to the fullest. And then, I mean, when you think of AI, it's always if you think especially of where it's used in social sciences, it's always a twofold thing. Of course, the AI learns from data, and if the data is kind of discriminative towards certain genders or people or whatsoever, then the AI will, as it mimics what is in the data, will also be discriminative. So there is a certain level to understandability is kind of is available, I guess, but it's to the very, very core principles. And when you really, and then there's this other end of AI where it, for example, plays games. So there's reinforcement learning where you start, for example, with a random player, or you start with some games that have been played, and then it learns some strategies. And yeah, so it learns at least the human strategies as it was done for Go. And then you let it play against itself, and kind of it develops new strategies. And then it's kind of, you can kind of follow the trace to a certain extent. So there's these kind of special cases where you have some sort of explainability. But if you try to get like this kind of a model, and the AI gets you some output, then there's, at least at the moment, no very, very good way to kind of understand what the AI tells you. So yeah, it would be good to have more explainability, but it is a twofold thing. It's explainability that lies in the data and in what the training gives you. So I guess we are far away from that.
Well, I will grab this opportunity to comment on the previous discussion a little bit. So my feeling is for a while been that really these neural network models actually get applied to problems that cannot, or at least have not been solved with algorithms. And that's the whole point of them. And by definition, that means that you don't understand how to solve the problem.
I mean, we work together with a steel plant building company, for example, and they have, when you kind of, so they get like hot steel, and they kind of have like a huge, they kind of make thick steel thin, yeah, and at the same time the steel cools down, and there's a certain temperature region where we don't understand what happens. So it feels very natural because you have a lot of measurement data. So you build the steel plant, so you can also kind of put sensors where you need them, and you have a lot of measurement data. So you know by the measurement data what happens, but you cannot explain it by any rule that we found out so far. So at this point, what this company does is they use AI. And of course, if it's like if there's no better way to do it and AI does it, then that's perfectly fine. And so there's several of those approaches available. So if there's no alternative, then and humans can understand it, but the computer can in a certain way, then that's all you can do.
Another possible way of looking at it is, what do you mean by understand? Human understanding comes in two different varieties, at least if you listen to Kahneman and fellows. If you listen to Kahneman and others who have been working on how human thinking actually works in reality, and they will tell you that there is this analytic side, but then there is also the intuitive side, which resembles a neural network much closer in that there is nothing systematic about it. It just kind of gets exposed to some material, and then takes a shape which it's not a useful task trying to explain technically what's going on in your intuition.
Yes, I mean at this part then there's no other option on the market, at least no option on the market that I know.
Anyway, I wanted to move back to this conversation about the difference between how academics work on multiple projects at the same time and how other people might perceive useful ways of working. What do you think is the reason? Why do we do it like this in academia?
Yeah, well,
I have a cynical option, but I'll let you.
Well, I think the appropriate answer to this is that we need to respect the peer review. It takes time, and it is done on a voluntary basis, so you can't put too much pressure on your peers that are sort of validating the work. And then the gut feeling response is that that research takes a bit overly too much time because we try to do too many things at the same time, and that's why we cannot actually focus on the analysis phase and then the writing phase and so forth. Of course, thinking about your results and analyzing it takes time, especially if you cannot use machine learning to do some of the thinking for you. But it is a slow process. We could maybe write our research plans to be more flexible in terms of time, so that let's just apply for longer projects if the funders give you that opportunity, and to include some of that thinking, mulling things over in your head time into the research proposals. I think that would be like intellectually very reasonable. And then the bad answer is money. Science is a business.
Yeah, I mean, I will kind of support the latter view in the sense that if we think about 10 researchers working on 10 problems and they all work alone, then each of them will get one paper, let's say. But if they instead they decide that they will all work on all 10 problems, then the amount of time spent remains roughly the same or something, but they all get 10 papers. And so what this means is that there is this kind of push to game the system in this sense. And I see a lot of people, at least in British academia, choosing to kind of overlap their operations intentionally between them and some potential people in the same field, just because that will be beneficial for everybody on paper.
Yeah, I actually have a question to Tiia that came into my mind because of this previous discussion. So you mentioned that you have a pilot study. So how much do you feel that you can when you get the research idea that you can perform your work or study your topics in a timely manner? Can you start the pilot study, or do you have to first apply for funding for such studies? And I guess that this might be a bit silly question, but because I'm typically working with samples, so I don't really know how it works. So yeah, I guess that's my question.
Yes, thank you for the question. Well, if I'm honest, the reason for a pilot study was funding, because I applied for funding for Research Council of Finland, and I got very good feedback, but they were suspicious that this method is not feasible among older people. So that's why I wanted to conduct a pilot study to show them that this is a feasible method, and I used that pilot data in my application and hope that then I will get funding for a bigger study.
Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. So there's kind of always a bit of this kind of mismatch that the project actually starts at this point of time, and then you get the funding for it a bit later, and yeah, they are always mixing a bit.
And in this case, I think it was very good in any case to do the pilot study because it's a new method. So now I got a lot of feedback from the users, and I can use that feedback if I get funding for the bigger study to develop the methods before I start that one.
Thank you.
So, and I also have a question to you, Tiia. Thank you very much for your presentation and also for the very nice introduction into gerontology that I did not know much about or anything about. Now my question comes out of the box, and it's maybe a little provocative, but when I was listening to you, I paid attention that you used one word, perhaps only once, I'm not sure, but not very often, and that was death. And my question is that how do you, as a researcher in gerontology, how do you relate to death, and how do you kind of handle it, and what kind of place has this phenomenon in your study? In your personally and also more generally in your field?
Yes, that's a good question. I think in my study it's not that close because I study quite young people, and also they are often in quite good shape and community dwelling, living in their own home and so on. So death is not so close at that point. And also in our research center, most research is related to community dwelling older people and how to promote their functioning before they even got to a nursing home. So it's not so close topic for us, but of course it's an important topic in gerontology in general, and there are specific research focusing on death, and it's of course also a difficult topic to study. So I think most studies in that field are maybe qualitative interview studies conducted in nursing homes and interviewing people who work with those people who are close to death, or with people who know that they are going to die soon. So that is very sensitive and difficult topic to investigate. In quantitative studies, of course, we have to deal with people dying in the middle of the follow-up, but of course also other attrition, that they may not be dead, but they may not be able to participate enough. So that is also something that we have to take into account, that we always get this attrition, especially when we study the older or oldest populations.
Thank you. And I was thinking, when you said that old age, the definition of old age is like 10 years before you die, but you never know when you die. So it's perhaps I'm in old age right now, because I may die tomorrow. So that was interesting also, and but it also speaks for the whole kind of problematics around death. It's kind of a mystery, and it's a mystery actually.
Yeah, and I think that if you die, for example, at age 50, you are still not counted to be at old age at age 40, but it's more related to older age phases, that, for example, if at 65 you still have decades of life, so you are not in old age, because typically those biggest deterioration in your functioning happens in the last 10 years. So that is why I was talking about around 10 years before death.
Thank you. I think we can end here and say thank you to everybody for a very active discussion, good questions, great presentations. So, thank you. It was a pleasure. I learned so much. Just great. Thank you.